Well, hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to another edition of insideTauck. My name is Dustin Smith. I work here on the marketing team at Tauck. Thank you so much for taking the time today to join us from wherever you're logging in from. We really do appreciate it. We have a very interesting and educational event today with one of our friends and longtime Tauck partners, Martin Sloboda in Bratislava. We've worked with Martin since 2014 on the river cruises and on the Danube, and he's always a highlight of our guest experience in Bratislava. He's an author, a book publisher, photographer, and wine connoisseur, and is a wealth of knowledge on Slovakian culture and heritage, and we'll hear from him in just a bit. But quickly first, for those of you who are unaware, and this is maybe your first time joining, this is insideTauck is our monthly event series we've created to connect with you all virtually during our time of non-travel, to share the world's great destinations, cultural sites, expert knowledge from Tauck partners such as Martin and also all our internal Tauck tour directors. We designed them to be have some closer insight into what you might not expect from our wonderful experiences and partners out there around the world, and to hopefully inspire some future travel once you are ready, which we really hope is really right around the corner very soon. So before we get started, just a couple housekeeping things. You are all on mute, so if you do have questions, please type them into the chat function. I will be looking at that throughout, and we'll have time at the end with Martin to have some live Q&A. So I'll take a peek at those throughout, and I'll answer what I can, but if not, I'll leave everything for Martin at the end. Today's presentation will last roughly an hour, about 45 minutes with Martin, and then a 15-minute Q&A at the end. We'll be sharing a video at the start that Martin went out and recorded himself last week, which he'll introduce in just a bit. So without further ado, I'd like to start our tour here, and I will have Martin come on the screen and introduce his video for us. Martin?
Yeah, hello everyone. Good evening from Slovakia. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and present Bratislava. I guess for most of you it's going to be something new, and I hope after this presentation you add it to your bucket list. So enjoy. I did this video last week. It snowed. It was really freezing. It was all white, and we're having all these extremes. So actually today, 1 week later, we just had 70 degrees and I was walking around in shorts. So that video is really history today. Hello, I'm Martin Sloboda and I'm in Bratislava, Slovakia, and I'm going to show you a little around. I'm starting by the Danube River because this is how travelers would arrive for ages, because Vienna lies on the other bank. Bratislava and Vienna are today the two closest capitals in Europe. There's only 40 miles or 60 kilometers between them, and Bratislava is just down the stream of the Danube River over here. This is where normally the cruise ships dock. And in the past, right opposite, connecting over here, there would be the only bridge across the river. A friend of mine, an artist, created this. It's made of bronze and it shows Bratislava the way it looked in the 1700s, during its first heyday, when it was the capital of the Hungarian kingdom. So we are standing, look at my finger, right over here. This is the river, and this is a little artificial hill which was called the Coronation Hill. Since Bratislava was the capital of the Hungarian kingdom, the kings, who were for several hundred years the Habsburgs, would be crowned here in the cathedral. After each coronation, they would do a tour around the old town, and they would end up here by the river on the Coronation Hill, and from horseback they would swear the coronation oath to the land, and it's also oath to the people. And I'm gonna take you the same way they would go afterwards, from the Coronation Hill through this little street, which is called the Bridge Street, to the town's fortifications. You see, the core of the town in the 18th century still was walled. Over here, you see the moat around. There would be 4 gates into the town, and the town was guarded, and still is, by this enormous castle right up here. Later on, I'm gonna take you there. However, in the 18th century, many noblemen thought, well, it's just too crowded in the old town. I want to have more green. So beyond the town walls, they would build large palaces with gardens, like the one you see over here with gardens behind. That's today the Presidential Palace, and I'm going to take you there too. And afterwards, I want to take you to these hills, covered in snow now. Back then in the 18th century, this would be vineyards. It's now a residential area, and I'm going to show you this very view, right now, at the castle in the distance. You see, behind it is the Danube, and to the left you see again the old town, covered in snow right now. So, let's go. So, on our way, we're gonna pass this beautiful, elegant building of the Philharmonic. Quite a landmark on the way to the old town is the famous and historic Carlton Hotel, which saw guests already in the 1800s as Edison, Roosevelt, later Einstein, and even before Brahms, Mendelssohn, Bartholdy, and other famous composers. I've arrived at the National Opera, which is one of 2 opera buildings in Bratislava. As you see, we quite into music, just like neighboring Vienna. And it's just by the entrance to the old town, because this is where the town walls used to stand in one of the gates. So let's enter the old town now. So this is how it works now during the pandemic. If you want some food, it's just takeaway. I'm now in the main square, which is the heart of the old town. It's not a big square, but it's surrounded by beautiful buildings from many different centuries in many different styles. It used to be the main market square. Today there's also markets being held here, but also open air concerts taking place here. As you see, each building is different, with a different facade from a different century. In the middle of it, we've got the oldest preserved fountain in the city. Here, Napoleon is guarding kind of the French embassy right behind it. You can see Bratislava's winemaking past on many different buildings in the old town. The old town hall consists of some 7 different buildings in 7 different styles. The new town hall is a palace from the 1700s, formerly occupied by Hungarian archbishops. The belly of the old town is the old market hall from the early 1900s. It reminds of an old railway station. Here I pass the town's oldest church, the Franciscan church from the late 1200s. The narrow little streets, cobbled streets of the old town in Bratislava hide many little shops and galleries. One of the main streets in the old town is the St. Michael's Street, lined with beautiful Renaissance and Baroque houses. In the past, they'll be making wine in these courtyards. One of the old town's landmarks is the only remaining gate, called the St. Michael's Gate, dating back to the 1300s. And it's surrounded by some of the most beautiful buildings in the old town, and some of the oldest. The adjacent former convent served as a high school in the 1800s, and this is where Bela Bartok studied for many years.
Within another 100 meters, Liszt started his career as a 9-year-old. Mozart gave a concert at the age of 6. Haydn was a frequent guest, and Beethoven was a piano teacher.
I'm standing right in front of the presidential palace. You see there's a bus stop right here, and it's a popular meeting spot for dates. It has large gardens open to the public. It was built in the 18th century for a Hungarian nobleman who was kind of the finance minister back then. And since 1996, it's been the seat of the Slovak presidents. I made it up to the castle in the middle of a snowstorm. You can see the characteristic silhouette that dates back to the 1400s. It's really quite massive. The last reconstruction was in the 1700s, and it became Maria Theresa's residence in the Hungarian kingdom. For 300 years, in the big tower of the castle behind me, they stored the Hungarian crown jewels at the time when this was the capital of the Hungarian kingdom. So I walked up the next hill where there's a great view of the surrounding area, including the castle, where you see the residential area in the foreground. That's where vineyards used to be until 100 years ago. Just behind the castle there's a steep precipice down to the river about 100 meters, and to the left of the castle that's where the old town starts.
Martin, over to you.
Hello. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe the music was a little louder than I thought it would be. I'm sorry for that, but I hope by that you were able to understand what I was talking about. Most of you have maybe never been to Bratislava, so this is sort of the first introduction. You saw it the way it looks in the winter, and now I'm going to show you more the way it looks in the summer, actually, when most of the guests arrive. The ambience is, of course, completely different in the summer. If you don't know much about Bratislava, I don't blame you. It's a little overshadowed, I would say, put it mildly, by the neighboring giants, the neighboring capitals of Vienna, Budapest, and Prague, and Bratislava is located in between. But I can assure you, it has a little bit of everything. And we have many travelers who've done all of these big three capitals, and after arriving to Bratislava, they say, well, we should have planned for more time in Bratislava. Unfortunately, because they don't know much about it, they don't really plan well in advance enough time. They think they can do this in 2-3 hours, and then they regret that they didn't plan more time. So I hope that the presentation that I'm going to show you will prove what I've just said. It's a fascinating historic city with a great winemaking area right around at its doorstep, as you're going to see. And talking about wine, I need to finish my wine from the dinner. Lovely Slovakian red. So I'm ready to start, and I'm going to share my screen now over here. Good. So, oops. Right, I'm ready. So,
Martin,
as I said,
Martin, you have to share. You have to share your screen still.
I'm sorry?
You have to share your screen still.
I'm not sharing?
Nope. Share it again.
Share.
There you go.
Yep, sorry.
Good.
So, as I wrote it down, it's quite surprising for many people. Again, for us locals, it's surprising that it's surprising for other people, but that's the way it usually is. Of course, we're all proud of Bratislava and its rich history. It has its prominent position in Central Europe as one of the major historic cities. It's just that we, for a long time, were part of the neighboring countries. So we used to be part of Austria, we used to be part of Hungary, we used to be together in one country with the Czechs, in Czechoslovakia, and again overshadowed by Prague. We were kind of number 2. So ever since Slovakia's independence in 1983, Bratislava has been the capital, but in history, what is 25, 27 years? It's going to take a while, and we are patient. We're working on it. So, and let's have a look now. What's there? This is my favorite photo. As it was mentioned, I'm a photographer, so most of the photos actually you want to see my own. And I took this from a drone at 4:30 a.m. on a June morning, hovering 100 meters above the Parliament building. Now today that will be impossible because I think they'll be chasing me with that drone, but a few years ago it was still okay. So this, this shows the castle in the foreground. The downtown, the old town, is right behind it. You see the Danube River to the right. To the left, you see the Carpathian Mountains. And that's so special about Bratislava's location. You've got these, the Carpathian Arch. The Carpathians, along with the Alps, are the 2 biggest mountain ranges in Europe. And interestingly enough, in Vienna, the Alps finish. And in Bratislava, the Carpathians start. So the Carpathian Mountains you see to the left with the residential area, they're coming all the way down to the river. And in fact, the castle is built on the last hill of the Carpathians just before the river. So the city is kind of squeezed between the Carpathians and the river. So what's special? It's the only capital that lies in the corner of 3 countries. And what are these 3 countries? What do you think? Well, one is Slovakia, the other one is Austria, and the third is Hungary. And in fact, for many, many centuries, and partly even today, the people in the city were speaking 3 languages: German, Hungarian, and Slovak. Thanks to the Carpathians reaching all the way to the city center, it's a very green city. In fact, the greenest in Europe. And I did mention it in the video, Bratislava and Vienna are the 2 closest capitals in Europe. There's only 40 miles between them. So Bratislava is just down the stream, the Danube River from Vienna. So this is what I was just talking about. You've got a map of Central Europe over here. You see Vienna and Bratislava there in a square. You see Budapest just down the river. So basically, if you see my cursor, the Danube River comes from Germany over here, flows like this along this main highway, Vienna, Bratislava, then down here and to Budapest, right? So Vienna, Bratislava, and Budapest are all actually on the Danube River. I'm not sure if you can see, but up here in the north, this city, you can't see the name, but that's Prague. So basically, Bratislava is between these cities. To the west, a couple of hours is Salzburg. You may know, thanks to Mozart, there's Munich, there's Nuremberg. So that's our neighborhood over here. A little bit of history. Until 100 years ago, there was this huge country in Europe called the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was Europe's largest country, by the way. It was larger than France, and it was a bit like France. If you know France a bit, it consists of many different regions. There's Normandy, there's Brittany, there's Alsace, there's Burgundy, and so on. And the Austro-Hungarian Empire was a bit like that. And after the last war, World War I, it disintegrated, it fell apart. And when you look at the map, the red boundaries, that's formerly the gray boundaries within, that's basically the present day situation, the present day states, okay? So we had quite a nice stretch of the Adriatic Sea here, what is now Croatia, by the way. We still go there, it's not any more hours, but it's pretty close too. You see here what the city looked like in the early 1700s, the castle really dominating up on the hill, the city. Next one shows you a view from the other bank of the river towards the castle and the Carpathian Mountains and the old town to the right. And you also see the three, even four landmarks, if you want, in Bratislava. You see the castle prominently here up on the hill. In the foreground, you see this bridge, which locals call the UFO bridge. I guess you see why. It's older than most people think. It was built in the late 60s, actually. There's a fancy restaurant up here called the UFO. Up on the roof, there's an observation platform. You see the St. Martin's Cathedral. I mentioned it when I described the bronze model by the river in the video. That's where Habsburgs will be crowned for 300 years. And on the hill, you see the sort of needle of the TV tower up here. So this is, again, from a drone in the evening, hovering above the old town. You're looking at the main square here. And in the distance, you see the castle up on the hill. There's very long history dating back to the Celts. Later, the Romans were here. The Slavs, the predecessors of present-day Slovaks, arrived in the 7th century, then the Hungarians. And it was this territory was incorporated in the Hungarian kingdom. And later, when the Turks invaded Central Europe, in the 1500s, they were able to conquer large parts of the Hungarian kingdom, including the old capital, today Budapest, and they occupied it for almost 200 years. And that was the reason why the capital had to be evacuated and everything moved as far west in the country as possible to what is now Bratislava, which wasn't called Bratislava, by the way. But as you can see here down in the text, it was called Pressburg, mainly in German, until 1919. So Pressburg became in the 1500s, for 300 years, the capital of Hungary. The Habsburgs took over the throne because the Hungarian king had died in a battle against the Turks. And since they resided in Vienna, they had it very close to Pressburg. And therefore, they decided to have Pressburg as the new capital. Today, it's Bratislava, and it's been the capital of Slovakia since '93. And it's got a population of 650,000, which is about 1/3 of Vienna or Budapest and 1/2 of Prague. Now, the castle is, of course, the main landmark, and the castle hill was the first place that was settled. Of course, residing up on the hill meant that you could see invaders from really far away. There's an incredible view from the castle hill into the countryside. You can see as far as 60 miles, which means they could see an enemy army approaching when it was days away. They could get ready for an enemy. And that's why everybody wanted to be up on the castle. The present-day castle was built in the early 1400s. And then it was remodeled every 100 years because every king wanted to have it, wanted to look at differently. And finally, Maria Theresa, with famous queen, she decided to turn it into a chateau, her residence. And it was redesigned in Baroque style by the same architects who worked in Vienna on the famous Schönbrunn Palace. And they added these beautiful gardens and many other buildings, riding schools, and so on. So it really became the royal residence. Unfortunately, it completely burned down in 1811 in a huge fire. And after 150 years, there wasn't really much left. So most of the smaller buildings, gardens, and so were gone. From the main palace that you're looking at, only the outer walls were remaining. It was only in the 60s that they saved it and reconstructed the main building, but they didn't do the rest. And only the last, let's say, 15 years, they've completely reconstructed the castle again. You can imagine how much it's cost. They just finished into what it looked like in the 1700s, including the gardens, including all the gold, stucco in the interiors, basically everything. So this is another one of my favorite views from the old town hall, looking over the main square and the castle. Bratislava, fortunately, was never bombed in the 20th century in the world wars, so it's been beautifully preserved. In the summer, it has almost the Mediterranean ambience, and it's full of wine bars because it's a winemaking country. But since we're close to the Czechs, and the Czechs are the biggest beer drinkers in the world, of course, we drink a lot of beer too. The old town is busy basically year round. We're looking at the main square here, where there's concerts of classical music frequently from the tower, from the balcony there. There's regularly fanfare concerts. And also one of the famous Christmas markets is held here in the main square. I mentioned that in the video. I was standing in front of this beautiful building of the old opera house, because there's a new one built 10 years ago by the river, twice as large. So Bratislava happens to have 2 opera houses, which is really unique in the world for the size of the city. And it's nothing exclusive, I have to say, high culture in this country. Even children from schools, classes go to opera, ballet, and so on. We've been taking our kids to opera ever since they were 2.5. They fell asleep after an hour, but I think they had nice dreams. And it's all the reason why it's affordable also, and people go more regularly, is that it's subsidized by the Ministry of Culture, and it's and big corporate sponsors also. And Vienna being so close, just a 45-minute drive, and although Vienna has famous state opera, quite a lot of Viennese actually come to Bratislava to opera, so we keep complaining that they buy always the best tickets. What is special and unique about Bratislava, you don't really find it in the other capitals around here, is its courtyards. Whenever the castle was being reconstructed, it was usually done by the Italian architects, because the kings wanted to, of course, have the best, so they always invited Italians to do the job. After the castle was finished, the Italians remained, because all the merchants in the city wanted to have such beautiful arcades like at the castle. So the old town is full of such romantic Renaissance courtyards dating back to the 1500s that really make you feel you're somewhere in the south, in Italy or in Spain. And we're going to talk about wine later on. And in fact, Bratislava was a winemaking town for 700 years. And in the courtyards, they would make wine. There would be big wine presses standing in the courtyards in the past. And this is what the streets look like in the evening. They're lined with cafes, bars, and a seemingly endless row. So you could say some locals joke that the old town is one single bar. So until very late night, it's actually quite busy. Now, we're quite into food and wine, and the reason why we're into food so much is our location. If you remember the map from the beginning, Bratislava lies in the corner of 3 countries, and the fourth, the Czech Republic, is also only 35 miles away. So in fact, there are 4 influences from our bigger neighbors when it comes to cuisine, and all of this kind of blends in Bratislava. So there's a great diversity of the best Central European food, and this shows in all the food festivals, street food festivals we have. Each month there's one, and it's devoted to something different. In May, there's asparagus days, and then there's strawberry festival, and then there's mushroom festival and the wine festival, and so on. So during my video, I did stand in front of the presidential palace. So you have a better photo over here that I took from a drone when it was still possible. And it shows also the Baroque gardens I mentioned that are open to the public right behind it. And this photo also shows in the right top corner of the picture, vineyards. Just below the green, this kind of brown fields, that's actually vineyards. So the vineyards start right in the city center in Bratislava, even today. So this is quite a historic place, the presidential palace. Joseph Haydn would give many concerts there. During the Vienna Congress in 1815, when basically the map of Europe was completely redrawn, and for 100 years, it would remain the same until World War I. Vienna, for a year, during the Congress, was just so crowded with everybody, you know, all the ministers and noblemen and royals from all around Europe. There was no place to stay in Vienna anymore. So since this was very close, many famous people would stay in the Bratislava Pressburg back then, including Duke of Wellington. That's the guy who beat Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo. Another famous visitor was Archduke Ferdinand, who was the throne successor, and he fell in love with a countess over here, and it was a huge, one of the biggest scandals in the empire. Because she was kind of 2 steps lower in the hierarchy than him. Both of these 2 lovers were assassinated in Sarajevo that started World War I. And it's been the seat of the Slovak presidents since 96. Now, just a short walk from where the cruise ships dock. You see to the left in the picture, you see a bridge. Right by the bridge, the cruise ships dock. So it's really just a few minutes walk from the old town. One is in one way, and the other way, this way, there's very attractive new developments along the river. Beautiful promenades lined with great restaurants, cafes, and so on. And it's very popular with locals. And you really have a feeling of a seaside Mediterranean town over here. Now, Bratislava not only has 1 castle, but 2. This one is in the west of the city. It's in fact the westernmost point of Slovakia, as well as the city. And it's called the Devin Castle, built up on that rocky outcrop above the Danube River and another smaller river. So in the background, you see the mighty Danube River. In the foreground, it's a river called the Morava River, which flows into the Danube right below the Castle Rock. Now, this was sort of in the Middle Ages, they called it Porta Hungarica in Latin, the gate to Hungary. It was always a border post, and it was fought for many times, therefore. And in the 20th century, it became rather infamous because the Iron Curtain, meaning minefields, barbed wires, electric fences, were running all just around below the Castle Rock. So where you see where I'm pointing over here, the little road, this was actually a patrol road between the electric fences of the Iron Curtain. And the border with Austria is, as I'm showing you here, in the middle of this little river, and then it goes into the Danube over here. So if you made it through all these barbed wires, fences, minefields, you jumped into this river. Nobody dared to jump into the Danube because of the strong current, but this river was smaller. If you made those 100 meters, you ended up in the freedom in the west, kind of in Austria. Unfortunately, not many made it, and hundreds of people were shot dead here at the border. There's nothing left of it, fortunately, today. We live in a united Europe. You can jump into the river, swim there, nobody cares, you can go to the other side. So this is one of the most magical places in Bratislava. And talking about the Iron Curtain, Bratislava, apart from East Berlin, was the only major city of the Eastern Bloc in the past, which was sitting right on the Iron Curtain. But there's other history that precedes the Iron Curtain, just before World War II, when Czechoslovakia, which was a democratic country between the two wars and a close ally of the United States, tried to fortify or defend itself against Hitler. And they built thousands of such bunkers and fortresses along the border. Bratislava has 15 of them. Many were turned into museums, and they're very interesting inside today, again equipped. But as I write here, when the Germans took over in 39-40, they disassembled, they took all the cannons away, and they took them to Normandy, and they used our cannons, thousands of them, with which they equipped the new fortresses along the coast in Normandy. And they're using our cannons against the Allies when they were landing in Normandy. Now, in the south of the city, the Danube, as you can see here in the bottom picture, the Danube becomes wider because of a hydro dam, and there's this thin peninsula with a very attractive modern art museum called Danubiana, you can see over here, which is the biggest, actually, modern art museum in the city. And just adjacent is a great whitewater course. So it's quite a famous recreational area here in Bratislava. Now, my favorite topic, wine and vineyards. As you can see, they're right in the city center. If you remember the picture of the Presidential Palace, I was explaining up there in the top right of the picture, there are all those vineyards on the slopes. This is the very vineyard I was pointing to, okay? So it was the main trade, winemaking, and they were making the wine actually in the old town. I know that you've never heard of Slovakian wine. One of the reasons is that we drink it ourselves. We don't like to share. There's very little exported. But be sure that it's great wines, and with some famous history, as you can see here. The first champagne ever produced outside of France was made in Bratislava, actually. And on steamships from 1860s onwards, local wine will be exported to the rest of the world, all continents. And those famous champagnes were available on the Titanic in the first class restaurant. So I'm sure down at the bottom of the Atlantic, there's still a lot of great champagne from Bratislava. And this is what it looks like, 15, 20 minutes from the old town, out in the wine country. We have a continental climate, and it's very lush green, as you can see in the summer. And these hills there, that's the Carpathians. We call it the small Carpathians, and there are beautiful little towns and villages, winemaking with plenty of wineries and chateaux and so on, as you're going to see right now. So if you think this is in France, no, this is, this is right outside Bratislava. And there are other castles. There are actually quite a few castles and winemaking towns and villages surrounded by vineyard terraces, like you see at the bottom picture over here. And we quite into art. And art is to be found even in the vineyards. As you can see here, in the middle of the vineyards, this is as if a huge stone dropped into the water. You see the circles. It's the largest stone to be ever transported across this country. It weighs 300 tons. They brought it from 200 miles away. And one sculptor worked on it for 1 year to make that hole into the stone, so that, imagine the size. A man is about the size of the hole, okay? Now, I singled out one particular chateau because it's just so famous. It dates from the 1200s, including these wine cellars that you see there. They date from the 1200s. And it was one of the centers of wine production in the region. Today, it's owned by a guy who sold his media company before retiring, and he renovated it. And it includes his own collection of art glass. It happens to be the largest art glass collection in Central Europe. You may know that this part of Europe, Prague and also Bratislava, is famous for glass. And I happen to guide quite often glass lovers from the US who come here regularly to Prague and Bratislava to buy glass for their collections or galleries in the US. And so here in the upper picture, you see part of the gallery. Some of the most famous glass artists in the world are present here, including down here at the bottom. You may recognize this even because the author is an American, the most famous American glass artist by the name of Dale Chihuly. And the reason why the owner has some of his works is that Dale Chihuly has Slovak roots. Now, I know that you're probably more into history and castles than into something contemporary in Europe, but be aware that there are some great contemporary wineries there too. And again, it's not only about wine, but also about art. So this winery includes quite a big gallery. And this owner happens to own the largest Andy Warhol collection in Europe in private hands. And why Andy Warhol? Well, you may guess, because again, he had Slovak roots. His original name was Andrej Warhol. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is not Photoshop. This is also a piece of art. It's a container on the embankment with a hole. And through the hole, you can look at the castle. So I hope that you enjoyed Bratislava for half an hour, and that this will make you maybe add Bratislava on your bucket list in the future. So we all looking forward to seeing many of you over here soon, when finally the pandemic is over and we can breathe freely. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Martin. That was quite an education you had there. We appreciate it. You went through a lot of different things. There are a ton of questions, and I apologize. We're not going to be able to get through all of them, but let's start off with kind of more broad-based. You went through many different things that Bratislava has their hands involved in, but what is Slovakia, Bratislava best known for now, today, and how has the city changed in the past 5 years or so?
Can you see me well now?
Yep, you're all good. You're full screen.
Good. Okay, fine. Well, what is Bratislava famous for? Well, those who are into cars, they all say it's famous for cars, because some of the best cars in the world actually come from Bratislava. If you happen to own a Porsche Cayenne or Audi Q7, Audi Q8, and others, they're all made in Bratislava, also for the US market. But Bratislava is, I would rather say, in what does it differ from Budapest, Vienna, and Prague? It's remained authentic. While the other three have brought it to the edge of kind of over tourism, Bratislava has remained authentic. So we as locals, we go out to the old town. I don't need a cell phone. I just walk down the streets in the evening. I meet my friends, which is something unheard of if I listen to my friends in Prague or Vienna and Budapest. They don't do this anymore. So it's really authentic. It's very vibrant and lively. It's a young city. There's 80,000 university students. The average age is very low. And it's at the same time, it's strikingly modern and contemporary, very close to the old town. There's contemporary architecture and so on. So I think it's this blend of historic, this young vibe, and the contemporary that makes Bratislava attractive.
Thank you. There were a ton of questions about the history, as you might imagine, specifically around World War II, and in general. What do you know? What happened in Slovakia during World War II? And also, there was some interest around Napoleon's visit in those negotiations there, if you know anything about that.
Okay, I'll start with the older one, with Napoleon. Napoleon besieged Bratislava and bombed it twice, actually. And if you remember that Devin Castle, the other castle up on the rock, it was actually blown up by Napoleon, not to stand in the way, to stop him, actually. So he did visit twice. There's even a Napoleon Hill in Bratislava from where he looked at the city. And all over the old town, actually, that's a funny thing. You need to be not only looking, down or at the street level, but when you look up, like second floor, you often spot cannonballs in the facades. So that's what Napoleon left behind. There's a dozen of cannonballs in the houses that Napoleon left behind. So as far as Second World War is concerned, Bratislava, or Slovakia, actually was forced by Hitler into kind of independence, but in reality it was a vassal state of Hitler. There was the government back then actually collaborated with Hitler, and so they even started with deportations of Jews in 1942, but afterwards they stopped it themselves because they realized it's endangering the economy. But when later on, the Germans wouldn't trust the Slovaks anymore, because the Slovaks started organizing an uprising against them, which they called today the Slovak National Uprising. And after the Warsaw Uprising, it was the second largest in Europe against the Germans. And after the uprising had been suppressed, then the Germans finished with the deportations themselves because they wouldn't trust the Slovaks anymore. Still, there are some Jewish sites preserved in Bratislava. There's a beautiful synagogue, and there's a famous mausoleum and so on. So there's some Jewish heritage in Bratislava too.
Great, thank you. Let's get into a little bit about the architecture, I guess, of the castles. There was some questions around the reconstruction and how that's done, and how is it typically funded, the reconstruction of the big castle specifically.
Well, the castle, as I said, was a ruin for 150 years. There were actually several efforts to turn down the ruin, tear down the ruin. Fortunately, never happened. And paradoxically, the communists in the 60s decided to save it. So they turned it into a museum, but they didn't do it exactly the way it was. It was kind of contemporary inside, but they saved it from total destruction. So in the last 15 years, thanks to one historian who was going through the archives in Vienna looking for something, and by chance he found actually the original plans to the castle from the 1700s, the government decided in 2007 to fund this huge reconstruction, since they now knew what it looked like, all the details, interiors, gardens, everything. So that's what I've been doing ever since. It's cost some 200 million. That's $250 million so far, and it's been funded by the state.
Got it. And Devon Castle, there was a question on how you actually get up to that castle.
The castle is much bigger than just up on the rock. The castle has three parts: lower, middle, and upper castle. Only the upper castle is up on the rock. So you actually, it's not steep at all. It's a little up the hill. You need to go kind of around to get to the rock. Of course, to get up to the rock, you go on steps. But the funny thing is that what remains of the Devon Castle is just the first floor. It used to have 7 floors, by the way. Wow. But what remains is in the rock, because there are 7 floors down into the rock, kind of cavities that were enlarged into cellars already by the Celts and the Romans, where they kept food.
Got it. Great. There was a ton of questions about language. I know you brushed upon it briefly, just what language is spoken in Bratislava. I know there's a combination of a few, but could you go into that just a little bit more, and how much English is spoken in this region too?
So typically, historically, there were 3 languages spoken in Bratislava: dominantly German, then Hungarian, and only about 15% of the population until 100 years ago was Slovaks. Now, this changed over time in the 20th century. Today, Slovak is the official language. It's a Slavonic language related to Czech, Polish, and so on, Croatian, even Russian and Ukrainian. These are all Slavonic languages. So it's closest actually to Czech. We understand Czech pretty well. In the old times in Czechoslovakia, when we were together in one country, there were always 2 official languages, Czech and Slovak. Over here, we never learned Czech, and in Prague, they never learned Slovak, but we understand each other when we talk. As far as English is concerned, English has been for the last 15 years the first foreign language, and it's often taught in kindergartens. My kids went to an English kindergarten, purely English. That you have bilingual in kindergarten, Slovak English, or just Slovak, where they do actually teach the kids some English words. But actually, what is mandatory is from first grade, elementary school, is English mandatory. So everybody who is up to 40 years will be able to speak English very well. The older generations, they mostly speak German. they will probably speak some English, but not like fluently.
Got it. Great, thank you. I want to go back to the video quickly. When you showed the statue of the man tipping his hat, can you tell us who that was or any significance for that?
Yeah, that that was a guy who lived until the late 60s. My parents still remember him. He was quite a legend. And he was a famous eccentric, I'll put it this way. He was a rather rich man, lost everything during the war, after the war, as far as wealth is concerned, even his wife later on, but he retained his style. He was a little crazy. He would provoke the communists in the 50s and 60s, walking in the streets in a tuxedo, a walking stick, and a top hat, which was a pure provocation, because for the communists this was a symbol of the capitalists, of course. But since everybody knew he was crazy, they let him be. And everybody knew him. His name was Ignaz, first name. And at home they called him Nazi. Nothing to do with Nazis, but Ignaz in a short version, Nazi. And so since he spoke mostly German, and he would greet all the ladies, he would bow and top hat down. He would always say schön in German, like pretty, to ladies when they were dressed well. Everybody called him Schöne Nazi. And he became a legend, and he got even a statue, as you can see.
That is a legend. That's a great story. Okay, two quicker ones just to finish up. Just around people actually visiting Bratislava. What, in your opinion, I know you spoke about a ton of things, whether you're traveling there via the Danube or via land, are your must-see sites, something you just can't miss?
Well, there are maybe 10 musts. Okay, let's start with this. Forget that you can see it in 2-3 hours. It's impossible. Unfortunately, that's what still many people do. You need at least an overnight. Ideally, you need, as the Bratislava Tourist Board promotes, 72 hours, so 3 days. It's a 3-day city. Let's put it this way. If you want to see what I just presented in the presentation, even the wine country, you need those 3 days.
Got it. Well, we'll just have to get back out there then. Okay, to end, as people are thinking about traveling, any recommendations you have book-wise or anything pre-travel that you might want people to kind of take a peek at before they come?
Okay, I hope this won't sound kind of weird, but my books happen to be some of the best.
How did I know you were going to say that?
As you introduced me, I'm author, I'm publisher, and I'm photographer. But no kidding, my books, I have guidebooks as well as coffee table books. And they're available on eBay, on Amazon, actually. When you Google my name, Martin Sloboda, in Bratislava, then I guess you will find that. So we deliver it to the US, Canada, and so on also. And my books happen to be the books that are given as gifts by the mayor of Bratislava, as well as available on embassies of Slovakia around the world. So I don't want to, promote it much, but it's just the way it is.
No problem, Martin. I've got you up on the screen now too, if people want to learn more about you. So thank you so much, Martin. This was very educational, and kind of a new format for us. So we appreciate everyone bearing with us on the video. We're hopefully going to do more of that in the future. So it's always good to learn as we do these things. So thank you all for joining. Again, thank you, Martin. That was fascinating. Just to close here with this slide, if you are interested about our Danube River cruises that visit Bratislava and spend time with Martin, please check out our website. And our 2021 brochures are all now live on there. So if you would like to download one digitally or request one via mail, you can at the link on the screen. And Martin, anything to close with?
Sorry, me?
Yeah, I was going to say anything you'd like to close with as we.
Oh yeah, I just I look forward to seeing you, and I would love you to come over and taste these lovely wines. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure and honor.
Thank you,
Bye.
Martin. Bye all.